Obviously, the entire world changed, I would say, on Saturday.
It was shocking. You could almost not believe that it had happened at the time. And you're really seeing not only excitement among the Republicans here, but if you contrast it to what the mood is like on the other side, where they're wondering if their candidate can, walk up a flight of steps or is currently quarantined.
You've been saying this person is a threat to the lives of Americans and their families for years, and I wonder how many people actually believe that. Directly following an assassination attempt, I don't know what I would say. It would not be that measure, okay? I don't know what it would be. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. We have the living legend in with us today, Comfortably Smug, reporting live from Milwaukee. What's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. I always love doing Pirate Wires, and this is the place to be right now.
I know. So Smug hit me up like a week ago. He's like, you got to come out. And there literally was no way. I back-to-backs all week. I had to be here. It is killing me. And I made the decision, honestly, that was before even Saturday, which we've got to talk about, honestly, at the top of the pod. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, because the man survived, could not be taken down. But I couldn't make it to Milwaukee. I'm glad we've got you here to report live on sort of what you're seeing, what the vibe is. And I think before we get into all that, I would love, Smug, just like your general read of the room and, what's going on. But we've got to start with Saturday, the attempted assassination on Trump, because, we haven't seen you guys in the pod since. And obviously the entire world changed, I would say, on Saturday. I have a read on, all of that. But I think because we've got Smug here and, he's at the convention, I think it would be great to start with what is the vibe of sort of everyone there on this topic specifically, the topic of Trump and what happened. I mean, it's crazy. None of us have ever seen anything like this with a presidential candidate in our lifetime. Sort of felt unthinkable for a bit. You were shocked out of that. It took me a minute, I think, even while watching it, to accept that it was true, that had happened. So what are you seeing among, the diehards?
Yeah, I think I can completely relate how you said it was shocking. You could almost not believe that it had happened at the time. I think that what happened in the aftermath, that immediately after being shot in the head, Donald Trump gets up and has the presence of mind to kind of pump his fist and say, fight, fight, fight. And immediately in that, at that rally, you saw the energy change from one of panic to one of, I'd say more like unity. Whenever you see something like that happen, it's historical. And so everyone there, I think that energy has continued on this week. And you're really seeing not only excitement among the Republicans here, but I think a lot of it is also if you contrast it to what the mood is like on the other side, where they're wondering if their candidate can, walk up a flight of steps or is currently quarantined with COVID. That comparison is really apparent to everyone. So I think that has really energized the crowd here.
Are they feeling nervous at all that it's going to happen again? Because it seems, my read is that no one is really thinking about that. It seems like he survived it, so I guess he's immortal. But following the news that we've seen, the bit of the news that we've seen on the Secret Service, it just feels a little bit clownish and like sort of we're a lot less safe, or certainly our presidential candidates are a lot less safe than I thought they were.
Sure. There was a moment last night during the convention when the director of the Secret Service was present here, and you had a couple senators, Marshall Blackburn, I believe it was also Senator Barrasso, who were chasing the head of the Secret Service around the building, asking questions, being like, how could this be allowed to happen? So there's certainly, like you said, a lot of folks who are concerned that was absolutely clownish, that it could happen in the first place. In terms of if you're looking at the response in the wake of that, I would say the security here has been tighter than pretty much anywhere I've ever been, even beyond the level of when I've been to the White House, of how many checkpoints they have set up. You see, tons and tons of Secret Service. You see, the attack dogs that kill terrorists wearing the goggles, so if they needed to parachute in somewhere. So the security situation is extremely, tight here. And I think a lot of that is they can't risk having anything like that happen again.
I guess this is a really stupid question coming off of just, the assassination stuff, but I didn't see many deranged protests outside. I think I saw one sort of sad, lonely woman outside yelling about fascism. Has there been any sort of any stupid antics out and about?
Not especially. Like during the day, there's not really much of an organized presence, like marching through the streets of Milwaukee or anything like that. Last night, after JD accepted the nomination for vice presidency, as everyone was leaving the building, there were a couple of like nut jobs. Like there was a guy who, I mean, it was very clearly to try and provoke a response. A guy who held up a massive picture of the would-be assassin that says like an American hero on a sign. He was just hoping someone leaving the building would take the bait, but everyone was just basically just disgusted and continued walking. So there's like an attempt to try to go to response, but
sort of on that, you just painted this disturbing picture of a dude outside, and I get what you're saying. He was trying to provoke whatever, crazy person. One of the things I wanted to talk to you guys all about today was the discourse surrounding Donald Trump leading up to the assassination attempt. And I don't know, just the way that we talk about this candidate. I wrote a piece for Pirate Wires called Thoughts and Prayers for Literally Hitler. And the basic premise of this is just the inherent sort of the apparent contradiction in the notion of or the idea of really demonizing this person, not even demonizing, just sort of arguing that this person is going to dissolve democracy. He's going to kill your family. He is literally a Nazi, capable of sort of anything. He's a clear and present danger, I believe the phrase has been used, to all of us. This is a sort of mass casualty scenario in a single person. And you've been saying this for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden there's an attempted assassination. And you say, oh my God, thoughts and prayers. Hope, I'm glad he's okay. Now a lot has been said about this. I do think I was one of the first to tweet this like right after it happened. This was my immediate takeaway. It was, you've been saying this person is a threat to the lives of Americans and their families for years. And I wonder how many people actually believe that. And so I try to parse this question of like, do the politicians and pundits who've been saying this really believe it or not? And, one of the things you would hope is after the attempted assassination, that rhetoric would sort of stop. If you say that someone is a danger to that degree, I think it actually inherently justifies violence. I mean, if you actually, we all ask this question. It's a classic sort of like college, you're wasted with your friends. You're like, yo, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, would you do it? And it's like, of course you would kill. Baby Hitler would be fucking done, This sort of, at this point, we're sort of at this sort of strange crossroads where they really are making that argument. And I get it's really not even cooled down. I see right now Joy Reid has sort of slightly changed it up. Instead of just saying he's a clear and present danger, she's also saying she also seems to be arguing that Donald Trump staged the assassination himself.
We still don't know for sure whether Donald Trump was hit by a bullet, whether he was hit by glass fragments, whether he was hit by shrapnel. We don't have those details.
I don't know. What do you make about the discourse stuff, Smug? I mean, is that maybe too, or is much ado about nothing, or was that possibly a contributing factor here? How should people be thinking about it moving forward?
So I think your initial reaction was dead on. I mean, it's a perfect encapsulation of if you truly believe that this individual is this, clear and present danger and this existential threat to the existence of the country, and you've been saying, oh, he's completely analogous to Hitler, then that is the logical conclusion. And you saw in the aftermath, there was this attempt by, a lot of elected Democrat officials and more of the left-leaning medias to try to say, okay, we need to cool down the discourse. And so we got maybe, 48 hours at best of that. And then, the demagoguery, it seems like, has just gone right back to where it was. There really hasn't been any sort of attempt to examine the kind of atmosphere that was created as a result of this kind of message being put out there. And I think a lot of it is, completely partisan and cynical. And I don't think the people putting out the message actually believe it themselves. They're just hoping that they can get voters and grassroots activists to buy in on it. And they've been, largely successful in that.
Well, the thing that's kind of impressed me the most actually is how much decorum Trump has shown in the aftermath of the assassination, and how he really hasn't taken the bait, I would say, that he very easily could have. And I think arguably 2016 Trump, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone, Trump, may not have had that same self-restraint. And it's, I think, really just playing in his favor, because essentially he's sort of standing back and letting the craziest, exponents on the left, who I don't think necessarily I think most people, when they saw the assassination attempt, were horrified. But you have these, crazy people who are willing to come out and say, I think the New Republic, which ran that Hitler cover a few weeks ago, published a piece a few days later, somehow suggesting that Marjorie Taylor Greene was somehow stoking violent rhetoric, which of course makes no sense in the wake of the assassination. But Trump, I think, has really conducted himself kind of unimpeachably after this attempt, and I think it's probably, I would assume that it's won over a lot of voters who sort of might have been a little bit put off by, to say the least, by his rhetoric in 2016, and seen him as kind of, out of control, and, vindictive, whatever. He's thanked the Secret Service, despite what seems now to be pretty dramatic failures on their part. I don't think Trump has really pursued that line himself. So I've been impressed really with how he's handled it.
Well, I think he probably feels a great deal of appreciation and gratitude for the men who actually rushed to the stage. And, in a moment that traumatic, I imagine that probably builds some kind of a feeling. And you have to walk that line now between defending them and going after the administration in charge of that, which I saw his son Eric do last night at the convention. He was sort of walking that thread of thanking the servicemen and being like, no, these people are great, and criticizing the other. On something you just said, Sandra, you brought up two things. One, Trump's restraint, and two, passing. You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. So CNN directly following, within 2 hours of the assassination attempt, there was a woman on CNN who criticized Donald Trump for rising up and saying the words, fight, fight, fight.
Former President Trump got up and said, fight, fight, fight. I think what we're hearing from people is that's not the message that we want to be sending right now. We want to tamp it down.
It's are you fucking kidding me? First of all, I don't care if he got up and said something unhinged. Directly following an assassination attempt, I don't know what I would say. It would not be that measured, okay? I don't know what it would be, but it would not be that chill. You definitely just get at least 60-second grace period after somebody tries to kill you, in which you should be able to say whatever the fuck you want. But then on Marjorie Taylor Greene, I read this New York Times piece, also maybe the next day, I think, sort of going over the reaction to what was happening. And again, you can't really go after Trump because, as you said, Sanjana, it was an unimpeachable reaction. But they did mention Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congressman Benny Thompson, I think it was a couple months ago, tries to strip Donald Trump of Secret Service, tries to pass a bill. He has support of, I think there are 5 congressmen who co-sponsor it with him, maybe I think 4 congressmen who left Democrats who co-sponsored this with him. They want to strip Donald Trump of his Secret Service protection. And they want to do this not because for some stupid reason, he doesn't need it, he's not the president, whatever. I don't know. They didn't even try to lie. They just straight up said he needs to be punished. There needs to be a consequence for the felony convictions. So you want to you're not saying it's not dangerous. You're sort of saying it is dangerous and we don't care. Now that was horrifying enough before the assassination attempt. After the assassination attempt, that's obviously, you look back on that, you're like, this is insane. These people probably shouldn't even be in the Congress anymore. But it gets worse because there's a question, obviously, of well, do the Democrats literally want to kill Trump? Is that what's going on here? Are they actively trying to kill this man? And you kind of have enough information at this point to say, it seems like some of them definitely are. But to just put a bow on it, one of his staffers actually comments on social media that it was unfortunate that the shooter missed. Staffer obviously was fiery, but I'm sitting here wondering, like, on what is the climate internally that you have to have in which one of your employees thinks it's okay following an attempted assassination of a presidential candidate to publicly say that she wished that it actually happened. Like, you have to be saying the most unhinged things every day. And my general read was actually what Marjorie Taylor Greene said, which was the Democrats are trying to kill Republicans. So the New York Times catalogs the Benny Thompson thing. They bring up Marjorie Taylor Greene and saying the Democrats are trying to kill Republicans. And they're like, this is extremist speech, like we gotta stop all of this kind of stuff, drawing an equivalency. Now, I'm not here to defend Marjorie for everything that she said, but on this, it looks to me like some of the Democrats are trying to kill Republicans. Like, that is just like, let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's two sort of thoughts that I have. The first is I don't think most Democrats actually wanted Trump to die, though would be secretly relieved if he did.
Yeah.
And they would never say that out loud, though, right? So I think if he died tomorrow in his sleep, there wouldn't be much sympathy, right? And people would be absolutely relieved. The second thing is just going back to your comment, Smug, about there being a lot of cynicism at play here. I totally think that's correct. I think there's sort of an analog here with global warming and the discourse around global warming, where a lot of people are like, yeah, like global warming is going to cause the apocalypse, but they're like working from their desk job and they go home and they have a drink and then they go to sleep and watch TV or whatever, which is not what you would do if you actually think that global warming is going to cause the apocalypse. So I think that a lot of people are, like the Democrats know that saying, he's going to end democracy as we know it, it's probably a good talking point. Maybe it's polled well or something like that. But I don't think that many people actually believe that to be true.
Well, it seems like you're right. I think most don't, and then some actually do. And that's the sort of problem that we need to address is like, so we're talking about something huge like assassination, but you know what I'm also I don't know how much we can talk about this because we're on YouTube. I don't want to get demonetized. But I'm wondering, like, if you actually believe this person will end democracy, then what are you justified to do to stop him? And we don't have to talk about murder. We can talk about all sorts of other things, and I'll just allow you guys to use your imagination on that, because I'll be labeled with spreading misinformation or something for sharing my basic opinion or fear. But I do think, following this, something so shocking as watching that man. I mean, I was with my family, fortunately, because I felt like we all had like support with each other. My sister sent her kids to the other room, and I watched it with my little sister, who's not that little anymore, but my little sister, my mom, my dad, my mom. Once we all were like, what's going on, right? Once he stands up with the blood on his face, and I was the first one to notice that because I think we're all like piecing it together, the reality set in. And my mom cried, and it was just like a surreal, crazy moment. And it just puts everything into context for like, here are the stakes. Like, politics is violence to a certain degree. Like, let's just be philosophical for a second. That is what it is. It is the monopolization of violence. The whole point of politics, government, is to monopolize it to keep us from doing violence. They are violent in a sense, and it's quite violent historically, like the emperors, presidential assassinations. Like, it's dangerous, and we're sort of seeing all of that there. I don't know. It was pretty shocking. Smug, last thought on Marjorie, New York Times, the media reaction to all of this.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point of it feels like the media has helped this kind of permission structure when it comes to violence, where, for example, during the summer of 2020, we were told it's okay to riot, that, this is simply the voice of the unheard if you burn down cities. And you had police officers who were killed. You had, federal courthouses which were besieged and destroyed, and
innocent people also who were killed, random people, not just police. It was like,
yeah, and many businesses were completely destroyed, and in many cases, insurance doesn't cover burn down due to riot. So that was told, well, this is okay because it is in the name of our partisan belief, right? And then you could have, 6 months later, a riot occur at the Capitol, and then instantly the media's message was, well, this instance of rioting is not okay. This is totally different because it's not the partisan belief that we subscribe to. And so when you in the aftermath of that, when you keep the language ratcheting up and up, and it already, rioting and burning buildings is acceptable if it's in the purpose of this partisan belief system, what's the next logical step? And so as that language continued to be put out there, that this individual is an existential threat, we're going to have fascism. If they are ever, this is a dictator, and if you vote for him, then as we know, all dictators get voted in. But when you had that kind of message being pushed to every American, essentially, and it's by media outlets, it's by the Democrat Party, individual elected officials, it's going to have a profound effect on people's beliefs, and I think we're seeing the horrible conclusion of that.
You bring up a really interesting parallel in the Capitol rioting and the reaction to that, and it reminds me of a conversation we had on this podcast with Ben Smith, previously BuzzFeed, now Semaphore, on the riot, and he was really pressing me on the coup, the insurrection type stuff, and he was like really adamant that that's what happened, and I was like, he wanted me to own that. He wanted me to own that I was like a coup denier or something, and I am. It was not a coup; it was a riot, and I sort of snapped back. I was like, no, my problem with this is that it was a riot, just like the preceding 6 months of rioting, and it was treated in a completely different way. And I said, what I think should have happened if, there's a riot happening, they're breaking into the Capitol, like people's lives are in danger. If they're not willing to disband, they should be shot. Like you need to use police force to stop them and put it down. And he was shocked. He was like, oh my God. And he tried to frame me as this crazy person. He's like, I'm not talking about shooting them. Like, that's just crazy. Like,
should have been shot. Jesus.
Yes.
I don't think they should have been shot.
You don't think that
you're a real hard
you don't
liner.
think that someone who is ostensibly, you just said they were trying to take over the country. Is it really crazy? You just said they were trying to seize the country. It was an insurrection. Like, do you believe it was an insurrection or a coup attempt or not? Like, my bar is very low for rioting alone. Like, if you're putting people's lives in danger and you won't stop, you need to be put down. But the punishment for treason is a capital punishment in America. So, like, what do you mean when you use these words that you're using? And I think for a lot of these people on the left, on the media left, on the state left, I don't think there's a great question that I have, I think that we all have, that we don't quite know what the answer to is at this point, which is like, how much of what you say do you really believe? Like, what degree of this do you believe? Like, how much of an insurrectionist do you believe Trump is? And like, what are you willing to do to stop him because of that? I don't think we have an answer. I thought that maybe we would have an answer following the horrifying scenes that we saw on Saturday. I think we still don't. But we're about to litigate it all in the ballot box as a country. And there, I would like to do, I want to bring in a little more information for us to sort of tease out right now. We have a partnership now with Polymarket, and this is a great sort of trading platform for making predictions about the future. We've talked about it a handful of times already just because I think this stuff's interesting. And I think it's kind of an interesting extra piece of information. It's like a new dimension on what's going on where we typically rely on polls. This is sort of like put your money where your mouth is. If you really believe this is going to happen, how much money are you willing to bet on it? And we tend to get these really interesting results. I've seen a lot of, I've seen them be right a lot. And what they're saying now, so sort of like a election recap, basically, ahead of the debate on June 27th, the likelihood that Biden was going to be the Democratic nominee peaked at 94%. So following the bad performance, the debate performance, he fell to 35% on July 4th. This Monday, after the assassination attempt, it shot back up to 70%. So there was an immediate, I think, sense, it looks like, that, well, Trump can't lose now. And so why on earth would you bring in somebody else? You just let, Biden's insisting he's going to run. You just let him eat the loss. So with reports that Democratic establishment is accepting the Trump presidency and doesn't want to lose a rising star. As of today, the odds that Biden is the nominee are 26% and Kamala 60%. So something shifted in the last few days. And despite the assassination attempt, it seems like the Democratic bigwigs believe that there's a chance to win. What is your read of that? Like, and Smug, I would love to know, like, not only what do you think, I mean, is the swap happening? It seems like, and now we're hearing, Biden's got COVID, and Axios is reporting, they're hearing that he's going to be, over the weekend, possibly he's going to step down. We're hearing reports of Kamala's staff attacking Biden's staff and telling him to step down now and all this crazy shit at the White House. One, Smug, I want to know, do you think he's swapping out? Is it happening imminently? And then two, what do you make of the strategy there? Because to me, it seems not smart, but I could be wrong.
So actually, there's a very interesting dynamic at play here at the convention right now, where you have many reporters who are hesitant to report information that could be potentially damaging to Democrats, and as a result, almost get them, kicked out of their friend groups of fellow journalists if they're seen as helping, fascism rise to power. But an example of this was on our show Ruthless. We revealed a couple days ago that Majority Leader Schumer had met privately with Biden at his home and told him he needs to consider dropping out of the race. And it took a full 24 hours for ABC to report the same news, claim credit of that. So there's a lot of skepticism among journalists to report information that could potentially hurt the Democrats. Along those lines, this morning there's been a buzz going among reporters. You'll be breaking this on your show, that Roy Cooper, the current governor of North Carolina, is going to be visiting DC today to meet with Kamala Harris about potentially being a vice president. And the Democrats are trying to keep that under wraps because that would look like it's in progress, that it's already over. That would be a monumental shift. That'd be a significant political decision, given that right now you have the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, who's actually a Republican. The governor, Roy Cooper, is a Democrat. You then have a Republican take over as governor, and he's currently running to become the governor. So that would be, one state which is considered a swing state might be taken out of play. And the other interesting dynamic here politically is a lot of the names being thrown about by the Democrats in terms of who could then take over if Biden dropped out, because they do not want Kamala. They say, Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom or Shapiro in Pennsylvania. None of these folks want to do it because they feel like they'd be thrown in a situation where they're already bailing out water from a ship that's already going down, right? They'd much rather wait till 2028. And politically, they would calculate, and this further, the argument for how cynical the nature is. They feel their chances would be better after 4 years of Trump if they could run as I will save us from the damage Trump has done to this country. So they don't actually believe he is a threat to democracy if they're like, I want to run after he's term limited because it would help me politically. So it's just an absolute mess, and it's all cynical political calculations on their side right now.
Who was the New York Times? I believe he's a New York Times writer who was reporting on the congressional Democrats who were like, no one thinks he's actually a threat to democracy. Yes, it was Ezra Klein who was reporting that. I wonder. But Smug, what about the strategy here? What do you think? I mean, because is Kamala just the only person stupid enough to want to do it anyway?
I think so. I really think so. That she's the only one who would be willing to take it because it's what she's wanted for so long. She couldn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses. Voters didn't want her. So if she could find a way to be, thrown onto the ballot to run for president, she'd take that in a heartbeat.
It does sort of feel like her only chance. There's no way that she makes it through a primary.
She'd never win a primary.
Do you think there would still be a primary? At this point, I have no idea. So I know there's a rule set in 2022 where if the president becomes infirm or drops out for whatever reason following the convention, the party mob bosses get to pick, basically. But that's not until August, I believe, is the Democratic National Convention. So maybe that's not that far.
They have actually been furthering this proposal to just do a virtual online convention that just says, okay, Joe Biden's the nominee and that's it. And then just essentially show up in Chicago for a party, which is, very interesting that the party which is saying that we are going to be the stewards of democracy are going to just throw out the 14 million votes for Joe Biden that primary voters cast and decide themselves. I think either way, whoever is the candidate for the Democrat Party this November, it's going to be decided by their party bosses. They are not going to allow, there's no desire on their side, and it will not be allowed to have any kind of an open convention, any kind of a floor fight. Nothing like that is going to be allowed. It's going to be decided who their nominee is going to be.
For me, the interesting thing here is the certainty that Biden would be the nomination following the assassination, followed by a plummet, a couple of days later, as all the machinations begin to leak to the press.
I mean, I sort of tend to think that people are constantly surprised by how quickly the news cycle moves. And there might be sort of this thought that, whereas, on Saturday and Sunday, all people were talking about was not only the assassination, but also Trump's, how masterfully Trump conducted himself after the assassination. And by the way, I think that's probably why some Democrats have conspiracy theories about what happened, is because it just seems like, he pulled it off in some ways his response perfectly. I mean, the picture was world historical, and and as I said, he's conducted himself in a very statesman-like way since. But I sort of wonder if like part of what's happening is just the news cycle's moving quickly, and they maybe think, people are going to forget about this assassination, as crazy as it sounds, attempted assassination, in a couple weeks. And then maybe, the conversation, which a couple weeks ago was completely monopolized by the Biden debate performance, maybe there'll be some room for us to kind of field a less, skeletal, senile candidate. I mean, Kamala, I think, it seems like I'm really skeptical of those polls that showed her beating Trump in some swing states. I mean, that seems to me like totally insane. I don't know. I feel that I've read in some outlets that like Kamala feels very sidelined by this administration because she's gotten no sort of airtime throughout the past 4 years to make any connections with voters. And I feel like that's kind of true because most people I talk to really sort of think of Kamala as this kind of wine mommy, like sort of
coconut tree.
Yeah, she's just sort of this kind of weird politician. No one really knows that much about what her sort of broad vision for the country is. So yeah, maybe she is the only person like gullible enough or sort of like manipulatable enough to eat the loss.
On the conspiracy theory stuff that you were just alluding to, with maybe because it was so perfect for Trump, right? He came off so incredibly well and has since, that it does feel like, wow, maybe that's there's like a seed of this, like maybe it's a little bit true. Yeah, I want to just asking questions kind of thing following that. Maybe that's where it's coming from. I did want to talk about is how crazy the conspiracy theories have been, or just let's just talk about what they are. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not going to call anybody crazy, but the conspiracy theories are, there's a lot of questions about his ear. Did he cut it himself? Did the Secret Service cut it for him? Did the shooter ever shoot? Was it a government job? There's never any answer really about like, well, why did everybody else get shot behind him if Trump was just cutting himself and the noises were made up or something? But anyway, there are a million sort of sprawling theories in there. I think one thing that's interesting that I didn't have on the docket today, but I do want to kind of quickly bring up, and it relates to my first point. I wish I'd remembered it actually. You saw Taylor Lorenz come out really targeting the blue anon conspiracists. And a lot of people took that as a moderation of Taylor. They were like, oh, wow, look at her. Like, can I fix her? And I guess I would say broadly, I do think there's a chance that Taylor Lorenz could be red pilled. It feels very much in the cards for someone like her. Like that could happen. I don't think that's happening now. I think what's happening now is the blue anon conspiracists are being raised up for us to look at these really crazy Democrats that even we're criticizing, because they don't want to sit with the much more important conspiracy theory, which is the totally normalized way that they talk about Donald Trump as a dictator, as someone who's going to dissolve democracy and whatnot. Like the most unhinged speech about the shooting could not possibly matter as much as the reason that he was shot. Like that is the thing that actually matters, that they're obfuscating with this, with the blue anon stuff. The blue anon stuff though is pretty fucking funny, and we are going to like follow it relentlessly as it evolves, and I think it will evolve. But right this second, I want to talk about the tech stuff. Smug, we've got JD Vance in the VP seat. This is a man, really, I should just full disclosure, from the Teal orbit. I've known JD for a long time. We're acquaintances. We're not friends. I don't even know that he would remember me. But I know him through Teal stuff, right? Like I've invited him to events. He's been around. He worked at Mithril, which was a different firm, but it was like in the Teal universe. It was another one of Peter's entities.
I mean, I can absolutely assure you he does. Everyone knows you, Solana. Everyone here knows you. I'll say that.
But so Peter puts a bunch of money in JD's campaign for Senate, and now he wins. He's the senator from Ohio. Now he's going to be the VP, the very first millennial in one of these positions, which is also this very interesting piece of the JD story that's not been talked about at all. The fact that we millennials have not had a candidate yet, and I know that he's for political reasons, a lot of people probably really hate him. but he still is a millennial, and that's just interesting to me that we've got one finally.
My friends, things did not work out well for a lot of kids I grew up with. Every now and then, I will get a call from a relative back home who asks, "Did you know so-and-so?" And I'll remember a face from years ago, and then I'll hear they died of an overdose. As always, America's ruling class wrote the checks. Communities like mine paid the price. For decades, that divide between the few with their power and comfort in Washington and the rest of us only widened. From Iraq to Afghanistan, from the financial crisis to the Great Recession, from open borders to stagnating wages, the people who govern this country have failed and failed again.
Well, I mean, I would say, high level, just 30,000 foot view. He did incredibly well when he spoke last night at the convention. His speech absolutely resonated with his audience. I think the speech itself accomplished many of its goals in terms of when you bring up, the millennial aspect of it. I think that is an incredible strength for him. There's, ahead of the assassination, for the longest time, this was kind of being, this election was being encapsulated as one between candidates no one wanted. And it's just, the boomers just will not let go of power. And so, when you have someone on the ticket who's 39, and then as he's, in his speech saying that, well, when I was a freshman in high school, Joe Biden did this. When I was a sophomore in high school, Joe Biden did this. And then in the aftermath of September 11th, I enlisted in the military. So I think that had a very strong connection to folks who were millennials in the audience. So it was a tremendous success in that aspect. I think also one thing that he did, which is very powerful, is opening kind of the aperture of what a Republican ticket and a Republican candidate looks like, and what kind of beliefs are allowed into the tent. That if this is going to be a working class party, you can't just do that by saying, oh, well, we have someone playing country music at a rally. That's not a working class party. When you have someone who actually espouses the policies and describes how it is on a personal level affected them and the community they grew up in, that's a whole nother level. And that's far more effective in letting working class voters know that, hey, you are one of us and we do care about you. So it was a tremendously, I think it was the perfect pick for vice president. I think, as an advocate for Donald Trump, he's going to be a strong campaigner for him throughout the fall.
From what I see, JD Vance has supported aggressive increases in tariffs for Chinese imports, and he's sort of generally struck to a pretty hard line on China as it relates to tech, and also sort of bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. So he co-sponsored a bill, I think with Tammy Baldwin, that would have basically prevented government-funded cutting-edge tech from being sold to foreign companies. So it's kind of this interesting combination of, nationalism and then also kind of, tech protectionism, basically. He has had some good things to say about Lina Khan, interestingly enough.
I know.
This is something he's gotten a little bit of flack for, I think, from tech Twitter. But he basically said, I think the exact quote is that she's doing a, quote, pretty good job in antitrust enforcement. This is a reminder that, Lina Khan's FTC has tried to block some acquisitions that Meta's been doing. They've been investigating Amazon's business practices. Vance has also sort of co-sponsored some legislation with Elizabeth Warren. He's doing a lot of interesting bipartisan. He's done a lot of interesting bipartisan initiatives as a senator. But this was following the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. He and Warren co-sponsored legislation that would sort of try to get compensation back from bank executives. So that's not entirely.
So here's. Yeah. Do you have more? Because this is on the Silicon Valley Bank one. I've got thoughts, but are there more policies you want to?
And he's also cautious. He's sort of broadly supported the TikTok ban, although he's got some caveats that we can get into.
He does still support it. Okay, so Vivek was the one. Vivek is where I sort of first started realizing that you have this class of people coming from out of Silicon Valley who, on the right, are maybe framed as like this new kind of Silicon Valley person, this new kind of tech person. They feel like an aberration, pretty much. And on Vivek, he was anti Silicon Valley bailout is what he called it. Really, what we're talking about are, if Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, you would have had just half the startups in the Valley would have gone out of business. They would have lost everything. And I think that is a fine position to take as a sort of principled libertarian. But what that is not is a nationalist position. And that is sort of usually what certainly Vivek, trying to attract Trump's attention, was trying to be. He was like the nationalist guy. And I don't think that's correct. I wonder how much of nationalist thing, JD really adheres to. But the nationalist position to me was like, you want to use the state to increase your country's power, even in terms of, economics and business. You'd be a little bit more mercantilist, and you would certainly be pro TikTok ban, for not even just for the national security risks, but because you would want your own companies to do better. And I'm interested in, not only am I interested in where JD is going to land on this stuff, but even where Trump is going to land on this stuff. He's gone out now against the TikTok bill, and he's like now against the TikTok ban rather. He used to be pro, so there's a pretty big, interesting shift there. And for me, it's not really clear how the tech thing is going to land. People are making a lot of sacks. So you have obviously Thiel is involved to a certain degree, but he's not involved in this so far. He is not. I mean, JD might switch that up. I mean, we'll see. But Thiel has not been involved in this campaign so far. But you have Sachs, you have Elon Musk putting he's vowed to put in, I think, $45 million a month, that's a lot of money, man. That's a lot of fucking money. Does Trump feel some sort of allegiance to tech following that? I'm not sure. I mean, Smug, what do you make of the tech piece and the nationalist piece, and how it all fits into the new right wing?
Sure. So, when it comes specifically to Trump and TikTok, there's a lot of, again, cynical discussion around it, that the only reason he shifted his position is, Jeff Yass, an investor who holds a very significant stake in TikTok, started donating significantly to Trump and to efforts to elect Trump, and that could have had a part in changing Trump's mind on that. I think, if you listened to JD's speech last night, it was a nationalist speech. It was saying, America is more than just an idea. It's a place, and espousing the importance of it being not just an idea. This is a country, and that he was willing to die for it, and had shown that through his military service. I feel like he could have a very significant impact in terms of the policy going forward. You'll often see in administrations where the president acts as an executive, but they can have the vice president kind of be the tip of the spear on specific policies. Usually, it's out of a positive place, like, okay, I know my vice president knows a lot about this subject, as a subject matter expert, given his history as a venture capitalist, to help formulate policy when it comes to tech. And I think he would be a tremendous resource to President Trump in that.
I don't know. I was asked, someone has asked, I've had a couple of people ask me for comment on JD and what I think it means. And I think high level, it's sort of what, Smug, you touched on for sure, is the working classification of the Republicans. To a certain extent, JD Vance, I was talking about this with my mom this morning. He looks like a sort of Democratic hero of 30 years ago, someone who comes from nothing. His mom had an addiction problem. He's from, rural Ohio, the Rust Belt. He pulled himself up, became a lawyer, went off to the military. He speaks to those people, and he is what the Democratic ideal was for many, many decades. And it's not that way anymore. And there's a question, obviously, of the corollary is what is the Democratic Party even at this point? I'm not really sure, but I do know that the right wing is becoming this, and I think Trump has really been the reason. He started all of this. He's fiscally not a libertarian, and his policies are just very, very different than you would get from a classic sort of Republican. Like a Mitt Romney or something, or what's his face? The one who resigned, the one who worked out, Paul Ryan. So that dude. So watching the convention, I still see some of that. Like, one of the notable things to me about this convention has been how little all of these people have in common, it seems. Many of them stand up and just, they seem to represent totally different views of the Republican Party or what it means to be a Republican. And they all say, this is what a Republican is. And then there's sort of like, yeah, for sure. And I don't know that everybody agrees. One of the most fun controversies sort of in this sphere, I would say, is the question of whether or not Amber Rose should have been able to speak at the convention. You have Amber Rose is I think Matt Walsh characterized her from the Daily Wire, characterized her as an OnlyFans actress or OnlyFans star who has a face tattoo. Like, he was really upset about the face tattoo. And he's like, this is an immoral person. This is a whore, a prostitute, whatever. She shouldn't be on stage. And Trump doesn't give a shit. Trump does not care about that. And he never has. And I am looking at all of the sort of Christian nationalist types, the hardcore Christian right wing. And I wonder, like, they're like, oh, he's betraying us on abortion and he's betraying us on gay marriage. And he doesn't seem to care about those things. And I just wonder, like, did you ever listen to an interview of his? Am I the only one that actually listened to him when he was speaking? Because I used to criticize the left. I'm like, he doesn't say that. He doesn't seem to care about these things. I don't think that you know who he is. He's not George Bush. He is like the kind of guy, he's like this kind of boomer businessman who goes to Key West in a 3-piece suit or something and like fucks around at the nudist parade and then bangs a hooker. Like, honestly, like, let's be honest about who Trump is. He doesn't give a shit about all that other stuff. And in this Sluts for Trump thing, I think we are facing this challenge on the conservative side. Like what is the Republican Party? Is it fiscally fiscally liberal or conservative? Is it socially liberal or conservative?
Sure. So I think that there's a very interesting dynamic here at play where for a lot of Republicans, I'd say the majority, the most important thing is to win. You're not going to govern. You're not going to have policy. You're going to have any say in what the government's like unless you win. Of course, everyone is interested in my beliefs should be the ones that are at the forefront. But if the Republican Party wants to espouse itself as the big tent party, then they have to live up to those standards. I think Trump absolutely understands this is a big tent party, and every group that wants to be part of it needs to be involved.
My friend, it's always a pleasure to see you. Good luck tonight. Don't get in too much trouble. Send us fun tweets. Everybody should follow Comfortably Smug on Twitter. That's where the action is. Godspeed, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
One of the things that we were just talking about, we were at this sort of Sluts for Trump thing. And I think Matt Walsh was really going off on Amber Rose. It was like, she's in a slut walk. She's a feminist. She has a face tattoo. She has an OnlyFans and she doesn't give a shit. She's just over there sort of like in a hip hop video, like, I'm voting for Trump. You can't stop me. I think what Matt doesn't seem to understand is that Trump is just a political savant and he's identifying potential new voters through people who are able to channel like whole, not just themselves, but like not just their fans, but whole new demographics, like whole new kinds of people he's trying to bring into the Trump party. But we have sort of concurrently with this sort of fierce battle for what it means to be right wing, this sort of reason that Matt Walsh feels like he's entitled to tell Trump, who should be up on that stage. The rise of like a right wing cancel culture thing since the assassination. Do you want to sort of break that down, what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I just first wanted to make a comment about Walsh, though. I mean, he seems to have forgotten that like Jesus's best friend was a literal slut.
I know, like famous, like right? The most famous one,
Mary Magdalene. Am I right?
Yeah.
I feel like the demo that Trump has found, which has always been with him, but has not been really identified, is the Hawk Tuah demo. It's like the non-Christian right wing, middle class, working class group of people that this is most people. I think it's like the Hawk Tuah demo, and I think Amber Rose fits into that. Not like it's not an uncomfortable fit. Like I think she's at least adjacent, if not there, with them, with the Hawk Tuah girl and all of her friends and compatriots. On the Libs of TikTok thing, yeah. So the news. So there's a few news items this week that seem to indicate that the highly online right is just as deranged as woke as the highly online left that has kind of sat in the seat of power since, between 2017 and 2023, let's say. On Tuesday, it appears that Home Depot fired one of its cashiers, and this is kind of a crazy story because they fired one of its cashiers after somebody found this cashier. This is an old lady, this cashier. They found her in the comment section of a Facebook post saying that she wished that Trump would have been assassinated on Saturday. And then somebody found that comment and went to Home Depot and found her and recorded her while he was asking her, "Hey, is this you're this lady, right? This is your name, right? Do you still think that Trump should have been assassinated?" Libs of TikTok retweeted that and tagged Home Depot. And I'm not 100% sure of the timeline here, but I think this Libs of TikTok was the reason. Home Depot, shortly after that, I think, said that this employee doesn't share our values. And I think I'm sure she's fired. I don't know if they explicitly said that she was fired. So basically, Libs of TikTok went from being canceled by journalists incessantly a year ago or 2 years ago to somebody who's been on an absolute witch hunt. I mean, there's been a lot of this on Libs of TikTok since Saturday, finding just random people, like truly random people who have said like a stupid thing about Trump and tagging their employers. It's pretty hypocritical.
It's definitely, you obviously have seen, so we see the right-wing cancelers, we see the right-wing people saying we shouldn't be canceling, we're anti-cancel culture. We see the left-wing people saying this is cancel culture hypocrisy. They're not that much on the left, to be honest. And I think the reason is because at the end of the day, we're still talking about the attempted assassination of the president. So it's like, it's a very extreme version. Still, I don't know why on earth people think that it makes sense to go after like an old woman working at a Home Depot when you have a congressman still in office who tried to remove Donald Trump's Secret Service, like protection. That's where people should be focused right now. It should be getting questions from him. It should be getting questions from the Secret Service about why on earth you had random fucking MAGA fans out there pointing to the roof saying, "Hey, it looks like there's a killer over there." And it took minutes and minutes for someone to do something about that. And Donald Trump is still talking. Like, where's the focus? I don't understand. And I think I called this out when Lorenz and Libs went after each other. They had that sit down and they came like dressed like the sort of Halloween version of each other. Lorenz had the mask. Libs of TikTok had the face of Taylor crying on her shirt. She came with the mask to give Taylor, like they were both doing their thing. They sort of looked the same. And I'm like, you guys are the same fucking person. You're just coming at it from a different place. And I think for Libs, it's like, that she's just this like sort of instinctual creature, and she's driven to punish bad things, and there's no real. It's like a force of nature kind of thing. She's a poster. She doesn't actually have much skin in the game. I don't think she actually cares. She just hates the left, and she just hates. Period. She's a fucking hater. She's like and that hatred has seeped into her soul, and I think you see this a lot on the like Libs of TikTok and the like sort of Matt Walshian Daily Wire right wing, where these people just want to punish crazy people. Like, how many times do we have to hear about some blue-haired idiot teacher in the middle of the country before we move on to the people who actually matter? Like those people don't matter. The people who matter are the people in charge, people with power. And I think my biggest problem with sort of cancel culture back in the day was not ever like, oh, you're going after Mark Zuckerberg. You can't cancel Mark Zuckerberg. Like I have a problem with the coverage of Mark Zuckerberg and biased coverage in general, but the cancel culture thing was like, I remember a janitor making like an inappropriate joke or something. And that's crazy. That's not okay. Oh, that's the stuff that I'm talking about. I remember actually Taylor Lorenz doing a piece on on students in high school losing their college. I think it was their college admissions were being revoked in this June 2020. They were being like racism was being uncovered. One of those racist things was a student had talked about, well, all lives matter, which it's funny now to look back and remember that used to be like a third rail. Like if you said all lives matter, you want, racism in this country. You want like a systemically racist society. Things were very different back then, but that stuff is, it's really, really dark.
Well, I don't understand. I've never really understood the association of cancel culture generally with just the left, because to me, it just seems like a manifestation of a very human dynamic, which is to say joining a mob and just sort of like crucifying anyone you can get, your hands on, who you can rally the mob against. It's a very ugly dynamic, but I do think that the exceptional person is the person who can resist it, actually. And that, of course, by definition is going to be, not the majority of people. I think most people, my sense is, unfortunately, most people, if you're canceling someone they disagree with, would like grab a pitchfork and join you. And I think the kind of like Matt Walsh's and libs, they sort of embody this very like puritanical, instinct that I do think is kind of part and parcel of some aspect of the American experience. Like there is a part of America, I think, that is still like sort of deeply puritanical. I always think of like the opening of Philip Roth's novel, The Human Stain, where he's talking about the like hysteria after the Clinton Monica Lewinsky thing came out and how like America lost its mind over a blowjob was how he basically put it. And I do think, I mean, it's just kind of ugly behavior. It's unnecessary. I mean, you see this like kind of old, heavyset woman working this horrible job at Home Depot, and it's like she said something stupid on Facebook, but in
the comment section of a post, she didn't even post; she just commented.
Yeah, and it's like, I think what scares me about it is it really does feel like a violation of privacy in some ways. Like I do feel that if you put yourself in the public sphere, you kind of open yourself up in some ways to cancellation. And that's like part of the contract of, the like slight degree of narcissism at the least that takes putting yourself in the public sphere. But like most people who don't do it and are just, using Facebook to stay in touch with their friends, or I don't know, look at AI generated cake. They don't really. It seems like a violation of some social contract. It's perverse.
What feels related to that is I just saw this random Instagram the other day about there was a kid who went super viral from Target for being cute. It was like all these like teenage girls who were obsessed with him. I forget, his name was like something Target, and he was just like this like boy next door kind of kid, and he absolutely blew up. It became, and this I remembered it. I was like, holy shit, I remember that story. And I felt like it was yesterday, but I looked it up. It was 10 years ago in 2014. This kid went absolutely viral. He was, I think, like 15 years old, 15 or 16. He went on Ellen and became this like crazy, almost like the celebrity was bigger than him. And he reports as like, he never liked it. There was not one piece of this attention that he liked. He didn't ask for it. Like what had happened was he was working at Target and someone filmed him and they uploaded their film of him online. And they were like, look at this hot guy at Target. And the internet lost its mind. They were like, who is this hot guy at Target? So he's like, I never asked for this. I didn't like it. I never felt comfortable. Everyone in his life sort of was like, oh, you should do something with this. They kind of kept pressuring him into it. And so naturally he ended up doing like a YouTube thing for a minute. And then he started an Instagram for bodybuilding eventually in I think his early 20s. And he finally left it all behind. And now 10 years later, he's I think he's working for UPS and he loves it. And he's like, it's a super not public job and he's just delivering boxes and he's very happy with that. And I agree with you. It's this weird thing now that we live in this world where we don't have to really worry about it at all because we made the decision to be out here. And so if someone comes after like a comment I said on Twitter, it's like, must be Tuesday. Like that's just, I expect that to happen. But if it's like, I don't know, my sister decides to comment on an Instagram that bothers her, a mom of 2 in Tampa, which she doesn't do, but let's say that she did. So one really pissed her off one day and she's like, what is this stupid thing? And she like uses the wrong word that she doesn't know is the wrong word because she doesn't live online like the rest of us fucking psychopaths. And then someone goes to her job. That's not only a violation, but it's very scary. Like how do you go to someone's place of work and not realize that you're in the wrong? That's a little bit crazy. Again, the assassination thing is nuts, you know? It's weird that people think that that's okay. But it's also just weird that people think that they're going to go to some old woman's job and harass them. I don't know.
I wanted to bring up that there is a kind of a difference, and hopefully we don't get there with the right. But I just remembered it must have been in between 2018 and 2020, a UPS driver or somebody like that was like just driving down the road, and he just happened to have his hand like this, which at the time there was like a 2-month hysteria that holding your hand up like in the OK symbol was a symbol of white supremacy. This guy, I think, gets fired for that. Somebody like pulled up next to him, took a picture, and then posted it on Twitter and was like, hey, Amazon or UPS, do you support white supremacy? Because your driver does. And I think the driver was not a white guy either. And I think so. and so that for me symbolized like, okay, they're just making stuff up and getting people canceled for this made up thing. And so I can see how like saying, yeah, I wish Trump was assassinated. That's in a different category.
Right.
And then people going after her is in a different category than the heights that we reached in 2018, 2019, with the left just going after people for imagined offenses, which, you know, hopefully we don't get there with Matt Walsh and Libs of TikTok.
I think the easy distinction is, well, first of all, like you said, these things, it's a different class of thing. And that sounds like you're being a hypocrite. Like, oh, my side, like, I don't agree with the Trump assassination. So like, of course I think that. First of all, no one should agree with the Trump assassination. We should all be horrified. This is not one of these things like, is it horrifying or not? We should all agree that it's horrifying. So it does feel like it's a separate class of thing. But then within the world of people who are saying this, like some people should be fucking canceled. You work for a congressman, and you say this publicly, you should lose your job. Of course, you should not have a job at that point. Like, there are certain people who do need to be canceled for espousing an opinion like that. And it's like, is it cancellation, or is it just like, you said the president should die and you work in politics, and so of course you shouldn't have a job anymore? I believe that the left used to call this consequence culture. I think it's just like a matter of, I was always a little bit uneasy about the cancellation thing. Like, I see people defending them now all the way. And my read of it is, well, are you saying that they should be able to say anything? Like, is there no limit at all to what someone should say before you want to fire them? I would fire people. I mean, if you guys started trashing Pirate Wires publicly, I'd fire you. Is that cancel culture? Like, what makes it cancel culture? Well, at what point, does your view publicly, is it just like you should have any political view you want? Does that include assassination? Like where, are you allowed to draw lines? I don't know. I don't actually fully know what the rules of cancel culture are. I know that like you should be free to say whatever you want. I know that Twitter should not ban you for saying whatever you want, though I do think you want to have a rule against calling for violence. But when it comes to a private person wanting to work with someone else, I do think that you're allowed to choose, who you want to work with.
I think it's cancel culture when I think the instance of the Home Depot getting fired is cancel culture. I think what Home Depot should have done is said, look, if they felt they had to respond, which I don't know if they even did have to respond to that, then they could have said, look, we do not support political violence, but we also do not monitor our employees' social media accounts, and they can basically say whatever they want as long as it doesn't, I don't know, X, Y, and it doesn't like violate the law in some way. I think that would have been an appropriate response, and they would have risked nothing.
Well, no, that's not true. It's they have a brand liability now. I mean, how many people who walk into like a rural Home Depot, how many of them do you think are voting for Trump? 90% of them. And now maybe you're right. You have someone publicly saying Trump should be killed who you're not firing. Like, that easily snowballs into a brand thing. Bud Light has you have this woman who works for them talking about her job, like the way that we need to evolve the brand or whatever. She was fired for that opinion because she insulted the people who work there. So like, there are these liabilities that these companies have to think about. I'm talking on the Bud Light one. I'm throwing back to the Sanjana. You and I were talking about this a little bit this morning. I'm talking about the summer of the trans Bud Light, the first anti-Pride, last year's Pride Month, which was fucking crazy.
That was just last year.
I know, man. I know.
Seems like it was in 2015.
I know, but that was just a year ago that Dylan Mulvaney destroyed Bud Light. But separate from that, I mean, that was a brand decision they made. But then you have their employee just talking about her job on a podcast, and is fired retro. Like that interview was old, way before the controversy. But then people find it, and they end up firing this woman because she's seen as, you know, insulting the brand in some way. These decisions are made all the time. You know, I also thought I think I defended to a certain extent when Disney fired Gina Carano. Gina Carano, she played one of the characters on The Mandalorian. In the first season, she'd be like the tough woman character. And she had been making a bunch of sort of right of center comments publicly, not really egregious at all. The one that they fired her for ultimately was, and people were already mad. They were mad. This was years ago. So this is an era of like, if you are right wing in public, you should be fired. Palmer Luckey was fired from Facebook because he privately donated money to like an anti-Hillary meme thing. It was like during the Trump election. He was privately, not even publicly, a Trump supporter, and they fired him for that. This is the era that we're talking about. Like, this is where cancel culture language really became a thing because it was so shocking and one-sided. But back then with Gina Carano, she's an actress in your show. She's talking about politics all the time online. Your fans are getting really upset about it. It's affecting the way they see the character. And then I think she said something like, we're being persecuted. Like, I think she might have, I don't want to get the language exactly wrong. I don't want to make it sound worse than it was, but I'm pretty sure she sort of like drew a parallel between the way that right-wing people were being treated today and Jews were treated in Germany. I think it might not have been that, it might have even have been that extreme, but it was in the sort of direction of that. And I thought, like, I don't have a problem with what she said. I don't agree with her, but I don't have a problem with her saying that. It was like one of, especially, I mean, look around now, like there are way more offensive things said every day. But does Disney have a like, do they have a leg to stand on there? I mean, at what point can someone who is linked to your brand be considered a liability? You got to get rid of her.
But I don't think that, I think that's like part of cancel culture, but it's not the actual, like, it's sort of it's the consequence of it, right? Like, to me, like, the cancel culture is amplifying someone saying something that you deem, you know, bad, in an attempt to then cause that brand liability that the company then can't really resist. Like, you know, and if you do it,
that's what the Home Depot thing would count as
right,
this.
exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So like, but like when the Bud Light, like if you kind of do it to yourself and you're working in a job and then you say something that, you know, in a somewhat public space, you know, like on a podcast or something, will be picked up on, then, you know, obviously Home Depot, I think, is kind of in a tough position where, like, in some ways, as you say, they can't not fire this woman and then set off this like PR firestorm for themselves. But like the actual step of going to her workplace and almost like entrapping her by making her say this thing on camera, that's the like perverse.
Did she say it on camera? She actually said it again?
Or what did she say, Brandon?
That's the
Facebook
perverse
did.
part of this.
They were like, you said it. It was just like just her looking scared in a video is all I saw.
They found this random woman's Facebook comment buried under some post on Facebook, and they found out where she works, and they filmed her while they asked, "Is this you? Did you make this comment on Facebook?"
Yeah.
And if that's true, if you did make this comment on Facebook, do you still believe that? Do you still think that Trump should have been assassinated? That's what I think is like the twist that makes this super deranged.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know. I think you're right, Solana. Like, and Sanjay, you're right. Like, Home Depot is in between a rock and a hard place at this point, or was. I still think, yeah. I mean, it's tough. You know, like they basically like had no choice to fire. You're probably right. Part of me thinks they could have been like, look, as an American company, we believe heavily in free speech, and like while we don't condone her statement, we protect our employees' right to free speech. And by the way, we're hiring in all these locations, or something like that, So I'm not 100% convinced that they needed to fire, or they could have said, look, like we put her on a disciplinary leave, we and just be vague about it. I'm not a comms manager. Maybe we should have had Lulu on the pod this week to discuss this, but
in a kind of related, in that it's, you have the different extremes. You have like the Home Depot lady, but then you have what happened to Morning Joe. So let's bring in Riley to break down the Morning Joe fiasco and round out the pod this week. We were talking earlier, I think off the pod, about Joy-Ann Reid over at MSNBC. So, and Brandon was like, no. There are multiple crazy Joys. There was the one Joy who was fired from the Robbie Suave show for being pro-Palestinian terrorists. And then you have, Joy-Ann Reid, who I don't think will be fired, but maybe, who is doing a sort of she's like getting into this sort of like, did Trump do it conspiracy theory. But also on MSNBC, what you have, and I think that she's not on air so much right now. I've seen her in like little snippets, but I don't think her show is on right this second. What I've seen her on is like the guesting on other people's shows. I see a lot of her unhinged threads. It seems like MSNBC is really trying to navigate this difficult moment for them, where they know they have a whole like cabal of psychopaths who could say anything at any moment, and we're following an attempted assassination of Donald Trump. It's like a perfect storm for them to say something stupid and lose advertisers. But Riley, why don't you break down the Morning Joe version of this specifically?
Yeah, sure thing. So the background for all of this, obviously, is we had somewhat of a newsworthy weekend last week. With the Republican nominee for president / former president avoiding assassination by like not even mere inches, like an inch. So you would think with like such a major news event transpiring, you would want your news show on the air to talk about it. Such was not the case for MSNBC. They decided to pull Morning Joe off the air, their quote news roundtable, with CNN later reporting that the decision was made in order to like specifically avoid an inappropriate comment being made on live television in the context of the Trump assassination. So like, call me crazy, but if your news talk show can't be trusted to talk about the news, like maybe it's time to move on to something else. So interestingly, Joe Scarborough, like on Tuesday, threatens to do exactly that. He comes on the air the day after and essentially like threatens to quit MSNBC if he's ever pulled off the air again. So my sort of take on the whole thing is just he should definitely do exactly that. For two reasons. One, because I sort of agree with like MSNBC's tacit admission here that this isn't really a news show and would be better suited as like a sort of like left-wing echo chamber podcast. But number two, because like Joe clearly has zero introspection about the whole thing, which is a trait shared by many podcasters. So like it'll be an easy transition.
Yeah, he's just be an asshole with a mic. That's what I am, and I'm great at it.
Exactly.
I think that it's very smart. If I were MSNBC, I would have done the same thing. I mean, I don't know that I would have tolerated him trashing the network following that. I would have had a heart to heart and been like, Joe, I mean, let's be honest. Like if you go after him in this way, it puts the entire network at risk. And also like, why do I have to even have this conversation with you? That seems kind of crazy. Like, can we not just evolve here? But they had to. Yeah, I don't know. Sanjana, what would you have done if you were, what is her name? I just found
Micah
it.
Brzezinski?
No, that's his co-host, but who is the president of MSNBC? Rashida Jones. If you had a little sit down with Rashida Jones.
Okay, there's another Rashida Jones.
You're thinking of the actress?
I'm thinking of the actress.
Not that Rashida. Different Rashida.
Okay.
This is Rashida Jones. She looks like she has a kind of like broadcast journalist looking glow about her. So maybe that's where she started her career. Actually, I'm not familiar with her career. But she is the president of MSNBC. And if you had to sit down with her, how would you handle the Morning Joe fiasco? Or not fiasco. Now it's a fiasco, but it was like they were getting ahead of a fiasco, I guess.
I mean, first of all, I would imagine Morning Joe has pretty good ratings if they, are still on the air in the first place. And I know that they are, or were Joe Biden's go-to show. He loves Morning Joe. So it is kind of a delicate thing. And I incidentally saw that today Joe Scarborough came out and said, he thinks Biden should, in so many words, he said he thinks Biden should exit the race, which I thought was interesting. I mean, I think the minute you have a talk show host trashing your network, though, publicly, it's kind of a hard line, I would think. I mean, this has happened before, with Tucker and Fox, where they basically just had a clean break. And I don't know. I mean, I actually think Joe Scarborough, it almost strikes me that like he wouldn't have said that. He wouldn't have come out and publicly criticized it if he wasn't already thinking about an exit plan. But I guess you're asking if I were Rashida, what would I have said to him, or how would I have handled like the
thinking that they have here is, if we do not keep him off the air today, either him, probably Micah, let's be honest, his crazy co-host, or one of his sort of stable of crazy, I don't think Joe would have done it, but one of his stable of crazy guests would say something in the heat of the moment that would be clipped and would go massively viral online, and there would be a huge risk to advertisers and certainly a reputational risk that MSNBC didn't want to own, because they're trying to balance a lot of craziness over there already. I mean, you have, again, like I said, you have Joy-Ann Reid constantly implying now that Donald Trump organized this assassination attempt himself. They have a lot to contend with. They don't want another thing. Yeah. What do you do? So they chose to keep him off air that one day. I probably wouldn't have. I don't know. What would you have done?
I don't think I would have. I mean, I almost think that the optics of pulling him off are already kind of a PR disaster. Like it's a tacit admission that like they very well could say something so insane that it's going to get clipped and tank the network's reputation forever, which in and of itself is like, I think, catastrophic. I mean, it was really for them to say. I don't know how CNN got the quote. It wasn't clear to me if like someone told CNN on the record, or if it was just like, but for someone to leak to CNN in any event that like the reason was because it was inappropriate, they could have come up with like an excuse, right? Yeah. I mean, like Joe Scarborough's sick, and maybe people would have said like, he's not sick. They don't want him to say like stupid shit about the assassination attempt. But like, I already think that they're out. But then there's this question of like, who watches Morning Joe in the first place? Like, I guess, is it already so sort of radical an audience that like, Well,
I think it is, but that's what they don't want to admit. I mean, that's what they sort of accidentally admitted publicly, and maybe why they really shouldn't have done it, because they're like you're saying right now. I mean, they've certainly admitted the show is crazy, but the show is only crazy because the audience is crazy. Like, who watches MSNBC? We've been living under this delusion that right-wingers on Fox News are like this danger to the world. And I mean, I'm certain there are crazy right-wingers out there. I don't think they're watching Fox News. Fox News is like normie boomer content. MSNBC is like, Joy-Ann Reid believes that Trump created the assassination. Like that's what she really believes. That's who you have on air. Like that's very unhinged. And that's a different kind of, that far left viewer is, I think, much more far left than the average Fox News person is very far right. Now, is there a comparison on, I'm trying to think of like another like really, what is like the right-wing version of MSNBC? Is it just like Stormfront or something? The neo-Nazi one? It might be. Like they might be this, MSNBC might actually be the Stormfront of the left. They do have some real journalists. I noticed that directly following the assassination, I went to MSNBC to check it out. And I will say, to their credit, they had real professionals there. And that is what, like that, the official narrative was like, yeah, we just want to go with our nighttime anchors for this the following day because it's such a huge deal. And I don't know why they wouldn't have just said that publicly, and also like, why wouldn't Joe have said that publicly? If I were Joe, I wouldn't want everybody to know that I was kept off the air because I was too crazy. I would be like, oh yeah, no, we're going with the anchors. Of course, I would do the same. They did a great job.
I think that's because like they said they were going to do that, but then different shows that were scheduled on MSNBC that day like aired as scheduled. Oh, so shit. It's like, yeah. So he knew immediately something was up as soon as that happened.
Poor Joe. Well, that's that for Joe. Do you know who will be on air next week? Is Pirate Wires. And we don't have anything to worry about because we came at you promising that we would be crazy, and we still are. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Leave a comment. Next week, it's going to be absolute bananas because my gut is that Biden's going to step down, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be a quiet week. But I feel like things are just ratcheting up. So expect the craziest thing. It might be that. Regardless, we'll be here to talk about it. Have a great weekend. Later.